So good morning. This is Michael Clemens with YouMeWe podcast. And this morning, we're very lucky to have Yuki Yoshii joining us from California. And why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Because people will imagine you're here in Tokyo with me, but the truth is you're not. You're where I was born, and I'm maybe where you were born. But and if you can tell us a little bit about the Satori Mindset and a little bit about the teachings that you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And it's kind of interesting. Yeah. You are where I was born, and I am where you came from. And for me, it's a good afternoon, late afternoon right now. So, I mean, obviously, I'm Japanese, and I think by now, Michael, you speak Japanese much better than I do. I think lengthwise, chronological time-wise, you have been living in Japan probably longer than I have been, because I have lived there 15 years total in Japan.
Right? I've got you beat by double.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was born in Tokyo, specifically in a station location called Mejiro. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's Yamanote line in between Ikebukuro and Takatanobaba.
Yes.
Your audience
near my house, actually.
Oh, really? Your audience lived in Japan? Your audience are
I think mainly in Japan. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, but then I don't remember anything before the age of 2. So what happened at the age of 2 was that I realized I found myself living in a country called Peru, which is a completely the other side of the globe. And my dad was a photographer. He's still a photographer. He still lives in Peru, Lima. Basically, he majored photography in his university, and then he traveled all over the world after graduation. He fell in love with the country Peru. He took my mother for honeymoon to Peru. And I'm the middle of the 3 children. So my older sister and myself was 2, my older sister 4. My dad took all of us to Peru, and I was there living. I was going to a Japanese school though. So the kindergarten, right? I went to a Peruvian, but then in elementary school, I went to a Japanese. So that's how I learned Japanese.
Okay.
Well, my parents talked to me in Japanese, and then I do have a little bit of Spanish background, which I learned through watching TV and through the nanny that we had.
Right.
Yeah, and then I was, where do I go? So I was not a confident kid. I suffer from asthma, which is very difficult to breathe. And you need to put your body in a certain place in order to feel good. And it's something that I, because I do things around mindset and the spiritual work, something that I know is that when you're experiencing sort of struggle and difficulty internally, right? Because you're feeling not free breathing, then the outside world sort of reflect that. So when I was little and when I was in Peru, I was never somebody who felt myself confident. My sister was so confident in herself. I don't know how she got that. She was like that from the beginning. And yeah, so the world was rather a scary place. The way that I saw the world was the way that I was, the internal experience that I had struggling, breathing, trying to breathe, basically that's a survival mode, right? So the lens that you wear to see the world becomes that, therefore the world felt like not safe, basically, right? So that was initial sort of childhood. And then I had fun. I enjoy a lot of different stuff. I got through a lot of different injuries. This is something that I might not be expressing too much because the field that I'm in right now is more like a coaching and the psychology and spirituality. But I think I started by the body, means that I had so many injuries, like many, right?
Like broken bones or?
No, I never broke bones, but I was blood all over, like a head, like so like, we don't have this in Japan, but like the shower curtain, right? We had that in Peru, and I had a friend, and I went to her place, and then we started to play it, and for some reason, I don't remember why we were doing this, right? But we were in the bathroom, and then she sort of got on the sink, and then she started to climb that curtain pole.
Right.
And I was the next one, right? So I went through and followed her, and I was heavier than her, right? So the whole pole fell, and I hit my back of the head in the hot tub or shower tub, whatever you want to call, and I was blood all over. Or I was running and I hit the corner of the forehead, or even when I was in school doing like running, how do you say it? Like a taiku guy, or
like track or
that's
track
sports.
and field.
Yeah. So I fell, and then when I was gonna get up, somebody who was running stepped on my end of my finger, and I had my nail long. Like, tried to get up, and the whole nail peeled off.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah, but that's just the beginning, though, Michael. I went to the hospital, and this doctor didn't know what he was doing. So he gave me a gauze, right, to cover without any lubrication or oil.
Ow. Yeah.
Right? You can imagine, right? Then a few days later, that is stick in my nail, which took me a little bit. So basically, long story short, I grew up experiencing a lot of physical pain.
Okay.
I experienced a lot of physical pain, especially when I was in Peru. And a long story short, at the age of 11, we moved to Japan. And I went to school. I played like a basketball, soccer. None of those sports didn't sort of resonate with me. I think I was just doing because others were doing, and still not feeling confident. And everything changed when I discovered dance. So people ask me how I started my dance. My friend invited me that there's a cool place in Shinjuku, Shin Minamiguchi. Which people were gathering, dancing, practicing through the mirror. So I was invited there and went there. And from there, it's just, the rest is history, where I went from there to dance studio. I did different things like house dancing, hip hop, old school. And then I started to work as a dancer at the age of 19. And when somebody from the jazz dance industry found me and wanted me to be a part of what they're creating, everything unfolded. Like from there, my career kind of started. So I have danced for a different artists, singers in Japan. I can't remember the name of the people that I danced at the beginning. They're two gentlemen. I can't remember the name of them. But they're not known right now. They were before. But like people like Hitomi Shimatani. Yeah, she's still around.
I think I've heard of her. Yeah, I think I've heard of her.
The main thing that I did was I was dancing for Kumi Oda. So when she was taking off and she sort of became very known, I was in that movement. But then that was the reason that I felt like I needed to get out of that environment and move to United States, because I could feel that her movement was about to take off to the next level. And then I kind of felt that I enjoy dancing, And at the same time, I was on my internal spiritual path, and I kind of knew that that's what I needed to follow. So creating some external excuse, and I told them that I'm leaving to move to Los Angeles, knowing that I'm not going to be continuing dancing. But the initial reason that I expressed to people knew that I moved to LA for dance. Internally, I knew that that wasn't the reason. And universe unfolded in a way that took me to transitioning out from dance to more of the movement practices, like mindful movement practices like yoga, Pilates, and then from there, like a holistic approach of health was intriguing for me. So, in the book that I just released, I'm talking about stress, but stress felt like something that I was interested in because people were talking about it and people were struggling with it. So that took me to move to San Francisco, where you come from, to pursue my graduate master's in holistic health education, where I study consciousness and the power of the mind and the relationship between the heart and all that. It's interesting though, because when I was in different classes where holistic based school is very different from typical traditional university, we have more experiential stuff. Like we didn't have any exam. We did have papers to write, right? So I did have an opportunity to sort of present in front of people or be able to use language to articulate more of the hidden aspect of the unconscious aspect of life. But I think the more I dove into that academic study, the more I felt like the ancient Japanese culture, Asian culture knew already, those stuff.
Right.
So it was nothing new for me, but more around learning how to understand, to create some frameworks and mapping. And I don't think too many, because I'm on the west side and you're on the east side, right? West side, psychology tends to be neuroscience heavy, right? But psychology in Japanese is the science and the study of the heart. So I brought that aspect in classes where when people went heavy on their head and the brain, I expressed the importance of the heart. So from there, and I mean, everything that I have done integrated in a way that is supposed to be, right? So from health, I mean, I was interested in health because I felt like that was an application, because I didn't want to, I was not interested in becoming a therapist. I was interested in inspiring and empowering people and to help people find who they are. But that and the therapy didn't kind of connect with me. And then back then, I wasn't aware of this term coaching. And coaching is an interesting, field because there are different kinds of coaching, and anybody can say I'm a coach, different, because it's not regulated fully. But I think if I need to say who I am as an identity, I think I'm more of the coaching field. And I think one thing that I have very strongly realized when I was going to school was that every single health issue is rooted in a spiritual plane. Everything has to do with the soul. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for me by observing what I have observed. Not many people might be ready to hear that, because when you are focusing on the outside world, when you're focusing on the intellect and the thinking, sometimes, the language of the soul, the language of the spiritual plane is very symbolic. That's why, I don't come from any religious background, but Bible is very symbolic, right? Bible talks about water and wine and all that, but has nothing to do with the actual red wine. So And I feel like a lot of the ancient people, and I'm saying that thinking about, because my father in Peru does something related to like archaeology, right? He goes to different civilization and all that. And even when the world didn't have language to speak, they were using ropes to communicate. They were using sort of different symbols to communicate. So yeah, it's very symbolic, unconsciously symbolic. You know, in my school, I had a class with dream studies, right? And in dream, we see things in a symbolic manner. And what that means is that, let's say, oftentimes what we see in dream is very doesn't make sense, right? Different things combine, and you don't understand, why am I seeing this together or something. So let's say if you're, you know, in an ocean, and then, I mean, over the ocean, the car is driving, and I don't know, there's a monkey on top, right? Just an example. And it's not like you're seeing that in your dream, but what ocean means for you, what the car means for you symbolically, what monkey represent as a value and internally is coming together for some reason, right? So that's what I mean by symbolic.
Right.
And then subconscious works symbolically, so you will never understand what it means when you try to intellectually understand it. So those are the things that, you know, I'm very interested in, because I feel like there's a lot of truth in different things that we can discover about ourselves, that it's hidden beneath the surface.
So you have something called the Satori Mindset. How did this come about, and how does it encapsulate the things that you learned, or is it something that you constructed to articulate the things that you learned, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, so Satori obviously is a Japanese, and then you can interpret as realization, you can interpret as awakening or enlightenment. Yeah. And if you ask me how I decided to use Satori, I don't know if I remember, but it just came, right? Satori, right?
And Satori means what in Japanese?
Satori means for me, you know, awakening to, realization, enlightenment. And so, but I want to talk more about the mindset piece though, because the way that I use the term mindset is very different from like motivation type of mindset, wake up 5 a.m. in the morning type of mindset, right? I'm not talking about that kind of mindset. I'm talking about where the mind is set. So it's the level of awareness. And you asked me to talk about the different dimensions. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit, right? So there are different ways to explain this, right? And then this is not the only way to explain it, but something that I kind of put together or came together organically as I was sort of expressing different things, doing like 5-day trainings, master classes, or even communicate with clients, where it's just idea shows up, right? And then obviously that is also a combination of me receiving different mentoring from different people in the past, right? So I think the path that I have taken is from spiritual space to mindfulness space to meditation to health and wellness to personal self-development. And I feel like I put my feet in different industry and space. And what I like to say is that I'm a dot connector, where I connect the dots of how it looks when I integrate all of this. And so I often talk about, you know, the 3D is the physical world where the body resides. So it's the realm of the space, right? And then many people assume that that's where they're living because they're used to create their internal experience through their 5 senses. So, you know, You see something, Netflix, you enjoy, right? You listen to hear music and you create a shift in your experience, right? Nice smelly flower is something that take you to an experience. Good food, which I love, right? It gives you an experience. And touch. What about touch in Japan? Like an onsen, right? So five senses: see, hear, smell, taste, touch is the main mode that people are accustomed to create experiencing inside. What people tends to get blinded is that, yeah, the outside world exists and five senses are the main communicator to have a dialogue with the physical world. But where people are really living is where I call the fourth dimension, which is your psycho-emotional realm. You know, the thoughts that they're thinking all the time, the inner dialogue that can be very whispering, that is there all the time, so you don't even notice that's there. The feeling that you are carrying through the past or emotional pattern, right? And so the fourth dimension, I talk about the thoughts and the feelings and emotions and beliefs. And beliefs, and in this fourth dimension, the work that I do is heavily influenced by people like Bruce Lipton, who is a cell biologist, right? He's the pioneer in epigenetics, where he talks about less than 5% of the cause of cancer is genetic, right? So more than that, it's by environmental conditioning, including your thinking. So many people who experience cancer, who have that in their ancestor, they might be experiencing that not because of the genetic, but because they assume that that's the, path, right? And then people like Joe Dispenza, who is a little bit more less biological, but still scientific. And then, of course, one of my mentors that I sort of dove in was Bob Proctor, who is more practical, day-to-day living. But I see these three people, Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, Bob Proctor, talking about exactly the same thing.
Right.
So the fourth dimension is thoughts, feelings, emotions, and belief. And that is where we're actually living. Right. So that is the fourth. And the fifth dimension is where it's less loud for a lot of people. Many people are waking up, especially after the COVID, right? The spiritual dimension. And so if the language of the three dimension is five senses, the fourth dimension is thinking and feeling. We think with the conscious mind, we feel with the body subconscious. And the mode of communication in the spiritual plane, fifth dimension, is knowing and being. And knowing is not knowledge as far as what you understand, but deep internal knowing that is beyond our belief, that is absolute and unshakable. And how do I describe that knowing? You need to go there to feel it, right? And then sometimes, like a podcast like this, like some of the audience might feel resonated with what I say, and the information and the words that I speak might reach somebody's deep inside. And resonance is when two things harmonize, right? That's why we call resonance. So if somebody resonates with what I say, it means that it has already been in there. Otherwise, it doesn't resonate with it, right? So when something resonates with us, it's not like we're receiving. It's touching something that's already inside of us. So that is the knowing, right? Because how do I know that? Because even though that might not be something that we learn from it, there are a lot of things that we already know inherently, right? So that's more of the spiritual plane, which, takes a little bit of time to sort of explain, and probably for people to sort of get used to my language. So that is something that I sort of has been developed organically. And I have come to sort of realize that the fifth dimension, spiritual plane, and the third dimension of physical world, they just are, right? They just are. And the mind, the fourth dimension, is what we want to pay attention to. And that's why I still like to use the term mindset, right? This is the whole reason that I started this, topic here, where why do I not call Satori spiritual path or Satori soul something, right? I do have a soul purpose group, but Satori mindset is the mindset, the realization and awakening of the mind. So the soul can bridge to come to this earth plane, the physical world, to express fully. That's why the mindset is still something that I'm interested in focusing on, but it's a little bit different usage of mindset.
So you talked about the third, the fourth, and the fifth, but what about the first and the second dimension, if you will?
I mean, the first and the second dimension is the third dimension. Three dimension has shape, right? The vertical and horizontal and the depth. And the first dimension is the dot. And the second dimension is the line.
Okay.
The plane, right? So you can use that as that language, or we can also use, I mean, we were talking about earlier about the embryo and an embryo coming out of the womb, right? I mean, the embryo might be experiencing such a thing as first dimension, but at the same time, it comes from the fifth dimension. So I don't know if there's any difference, but I don't talk too much about the first and the second dimension.
But for example, with YouMeWe and the kids that we're working with, for example, a lot of them, everyone's born, and I always say no one asked to be born, and in these circumstances, it could be anything. It could be that their parents were in prison, and when they were born, they were carried over to a baby home where somebody was holding them, because humans need this touch and nurturing from the onset. It could be that, like 2 or 3 or 5 years old, they were taken away from their parents, etc. And so with regards to the first and second dimension that you've talked about in the past, what I understood it is the first dimension is essentially everything that you just accept as reality, whether it be from your parents' teaching or your environment, etc. And it's not until maybe 6 or 7 years old that you start having your own opinions about things. And so where it applies to the kids in the homes that we work with, we don't call them orphans, we call them champions because they're kind of championing their life. And then when they turn 18, we call them ambassadors because they're going out into the world and hopefully, have learned from the things that we're teaching. Yeah. And we try to coach them. We try to explain to them that you may not have had any say in how your life started, but you have every opportunity in front of you on how you want your life to end up. Yeah. And a lot of the kids that we work with, I say kids, but the young adults that we work with, when we introduce them to coaching, etc., they're really fascinated to learn more about themselves because it's probably something they never really were encouraged to do, because I hate to use the word, but they are institutionalized children. They're in institutions, right? But if you back up to your mindset training and people who may have had varied beginnings, or when they're 6 or 7 and starting to make their own opinions about things, so influence could not. Maybe it isn't their family that's influencing them. Maybe it's the care workers in the homes, etc. So where do you see like the first and second dimension as the foundation for what you're calling the third, fourth, and fifth dimensions?
Yeah. So now I understand where you're calling the first and the second. But first of all, I want to say that calling them champion is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Because then that shapes their identity. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to touch upon what you said a little bit though, because I think I was working and collaborating with a known body worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
His name is Dean Juhan. He's actually local. He's somebody who wrote a book called Job's Body, which is the Bible for body worker, right? So when I was going through some body work stuff, which was part of my, journey, I came across his book, and it's a very scientific book, so it's not like you can read it anytime, right? It's a thick book, right? But I had an opportunity to collaborate with him many, many times. And he is the one who said it, that out of the senses, right? The human touch, and he says that because he's a body worker, and then the touch aspect, right, is overlooked, but it's the most fundamental medium for people or for humans or infants who came on this airplane to feel connected, obviously, right? Because infants and children don't still yet understand language, right? So that 0 to 6 or 7 part of it, even more, even when we were in embryo, there are a lot of pre-verbal communication that's happening. And pre-verbal means that we don't understand the language, but we're communicating through different medium, which one of those is a touch, right? And like let's say, for instance, the infant is born and the parents are arguing one another, fighting. The baby might not know what they're saying, but they can feel and sense what's happening, not intellectually, but in the whole body.
Sure.
Right? So I think we want to understand that the body is very intelligent, and there is an absorption of that already. So Bruce Lipton talk about the age of 6 and 7, we start forming intellect, and before that is subconscious. And then when the subconscious is fully open, because your subconscious mind cannot reject information, means that, when you're in a hypnotic state, the person who is getting the hypnosis gonna follow the practitioner, right? Because the conscious mind is being put aside a little bit. So it's like that for the babies. So it's very plastic and absorbable. And in that stage, it's really important to make sure that the nurturing of the infant is being created in an optimum manner. There is I can't remember that author, but there is a book called Continuum Concept that talks only about that, how baby is being held and not being held, how it was touch, not touch, influencing the path of feeling worthy, feeling something is missing, going to this sort of like existential place when people get to adult. Like many people in their adult life, there are people who feel something is missing, or some sort of emptiness, or not feeling connected with whatever the purpose is, often is beyond intellectual. And that comes from often the way that we were treated through the touch when we're little.
Hi.
Hi. I thought you went to the first dimension or the fifth.
Yeah, I felt like it. Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but I was hoping you had kept talking, but that's all right.
Yeah, I keep talking, but I don't know how long you are hearing.
Saying adult.
What do you say?
You last thing you were saying was you were talking about adults.
Yeah. It's recording. The adults. So when we get to adults, oh, there's another microphone.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Yeah. So when people get to adults, when people feel like something is missing or feeling the sense of emptiness or not feeling purposeful, one often because of not having vision, but another one is often that touch has not been met. Did you hear what I said about the book, the continuum concept?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thinking about Japanese culture, I mean, I'm sure that, when Japanese kids are born, there's a lot of nurturing that goes on with their natural mothers, etc.
Yeah.
Culturally, I'm not sure how much, physical expression there is on hugging and compared to other cultures, etc. So when we think about the kids in the homes in Japan, I mean, I see it. I mean, the caregivers are there. They're definitely being tactile with the kids. They're making sure to hold them. They're making sure, when they're feeling really detachment anxiety, or attachment anxiety, the fact that they've been taken away from someone. And in Japan, from what I'm understanding, basically, if a child's born in hospital and let's say that the mother's in prison, then the child goes to a baby home. But then at 2, they move to a different facility. And generally, if they're going to stay in the system for the rest of their lives, then that's a long time, 2 to 18, that they're living in a different environment. Personally, and as far as YouMeWe is concerned, we think it's good because it's consistent. They're growing up with the same kids around them and hopefully the staff, etc. But there's definitely, and I personally have experienced it, there's definitely a trauma in being removed from what you know up until the age of 2, and then all of a sudden you're in a new environment. And you see it in the homes, the little kids hanging on to the leg of the teacher, scared to death that he or she's going to be moved again. And it takes a long time for them to get reacclimated to being in the orphanage. How does that affect people, or what point can people try to kind of repair that, or what kind of practices can they practice to kind of change that way of feeling?
Yeah, well, I think everything begins with awareness if the person has the knowledge and understanding of what we're talking about, they can recognize why they're feeling what they're feeling inside, right? So that's the first step. And the second step is, I mean, the work that I do, Michael, especially because I'm not really come from a therapy background, right? And there are different great modalities out there. But for me, what I found is that it's not too much about trying to change what happened in the past, right? So different people use different terms and analogy with different definition, right? And there is in a certain spiritual community and energy healing community, we often use the term acceptance, right? Accepting the past. And I do hear often people using the term accepting the past. You need to accept the past in order to heal. Yeah. For me, not to make anybody surprising, accepting the past is the worst thing that you could do. Right? So because I'm using the term accepting in a different nuance, right? Accepting means that you're accepting that is who you are, right? Instead of using that term, because that's not who you are. Who you are is beyond that. Who you are is not how you are treated. Who you are is not the experience that you have gone through. It's much, much deeper than that, right? So who you are is in the fifth dimension. It's not in your fourth dimension. So instead of, and then accepting, to me, the, you know, the realization, right? Satori mindset is a realization of the frequency of realization, right? So mindset is where the mind is set. So it's a frequency, right? And Satori is realization. Realizing is beyond intellectual understanding, but is to accept and to becoming. So instead of accepting what happened in the past, the disconnect, once you understand through this knowledge, we want to begin looking at it as a way to embrace it, right? Embrace the experience. We don't want to deny it, because when we deny it, that pain will stay in us. So we open the door and then take a look at it. And then we want to acknowledge and recognize what happened for a moment. But that's not the same as accepting that that is who you are. But you want to embrace that situation, because I think I mentioned a moment ago that everything happens symbolically from a spiritual plane, right? As much as we don't understand why we have gone through what we have gone through when it's very painful, yeah, I believe that the soul chooses the parents. The soul chooses the parents, even though it sounds like the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah? So if we start, because the soul, the child, get birth after the parents, how does the child chooses the parents? But that time doesn't matter for the spiritual dimension, right? Because the past and the future is a concept in the space-time reality, but in the spiritual plane, it's just the present moment, right? So that reverse order, that's looks like the reverse order, doesn't matter in the spiritual plane. And if the child is choosing the parent, whatever that happens has some meaning into it. So one of the keys, Michael, to sort of stepping into this way of looking at things from a spiritual point of view is to begin looking for meaning, right? Many people who sort of suffer from past trauma or all that tend to ask themselves why this happened to me, right? So that's sort of like a first stage, right? And then when people start acquiring this kind of knowledge, people start thinking, why this maybe happen for me, right? So people start understanding that life is not happening to us, but for us and through us, right? But then, spiritually speaking, we want to ask, what does this mean for me, right? And then something that I haven't said too much on this podcast, but something that I love talking about is the fact that the physical world is the realm of the relative, where, you know, it's the contextual field. So left exists, right exists, up exists, down exists, pain exists, and pleasure exists, darkness exists, light exists, hate, fear exists, faith, and love exists. So, and I think I have probably expressed this in some of my training or videos in the past, where I feel like that 0 to 7, right, of the child not having a conscious awareness to choose is part of the game plan of the infinite intelligence. So that, 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 pain or whatever that the child go through in a way that they go through to experience contrast, which is for most people is the pain or something that they don't like, something that they feel like disempowering, but only then we can work on stepping into, moving into, expanding into who we truly are. So I guess this is a long answer to your short question. How do we deal with that? To not to accept, to recognize, to embrace. And an embracement happens when the pain can turn into the gift. And when the pain, because only because you experience that pain, you can understand others for going through the same pain. Experientially, not intellectually, right? So can we see that as a gift? Can we see that as a gift, right? And then maybe if you have gone through that, that is the plan, right? That is the gift that you receive to express that as a wisdom and a strength so you can help others to feel free. In the moment, like for instance, let's say if somebody went through that disconnect, right? In the 0 to 2. And then that person has been sort of wandering around with that energy. But one day that person found this podcast, right? And then acquire this knowledge and understanding, and then go through the work to be able to turn into the gift. And then that person ends up helping so many people because that person experienced that pain. It didn't happen otherwise, right? So I think the whole process is that to not to get absorbed by that pain, but to really observe and to embrace. And then we want to turn that into our expression of how to touch other people. And then when we start doing that, we start appreciating for the first time that pain that we have gone through. But until we get there, the pain will remain pain. And once we get there, the pain turns into a treasure for that person's life. And that is our responsibility inside. It's not our parents.
To ourselves.
Yeah.
To ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you have it. There you have it.
Yeah. Because I think, naturally, I'm not qualified at all probably to be in the space that we're at. But the reality is a lot of these kids I've seen from the time they were 3 and now they're approaching teenage years. And so in a way, they're not really my kids, but I'm witnessing them growing up, right? And I don't feel that they realize maybe the toolkit that they have available to them to solve problems when they go into adulthood. And we're trying to, in an analog way, really show them. We have something called the permanency pack, where we say, as an adult, these are the 45 things that I'm willing to do for you as an adult in your life. And so we're trying to help them kind of visualize and appreciate what other people may leave their own homes. And naturally, your parents would be there for all 45 things for you, but these kids don't have that. And then in addition to that, there's something called a transition toolkit. It's a transition from the home and from the care into adulthood. I think it's a very difficult and daunting challenge, right? And I talk to staff in the homes and they say, I've got 60 adults that contacted me constantly, online, for example, because they have questions about boyfriend, girlfriend questions. They have questions about jobs, about life, and they don't have anybody really to reach out to. And so I think for our work, both at YouMeWe and what we call Empower Village, which is this online village, and it's actually a physical place. They can come to our office and eat. They can come to our office and meet with people. And so it's like a community that we're trying to build, and what we call the Empower Village. We do want to be more focused on coaching them, helping them kind of find their way, helping empower them, and their thought process, that we can easily look at them and say, well, you naturally need to do X, Y, Z, but rather sit back and ask what it is that they want. And then when they articulate what they want, help them realize they do have a toolkit that they carry with them, and they can reach into that toolkit to apply it to the challenges that they have, as opposed to just saying, oh, I've got a flat tire, what do I do now? Right? Well, you jack up the car, you take the nuts and bolts off of the wheel, and you replace it with the spare. But when it comes to life, I think many people in general, whether they were orphaned growing up or not, don't really understand that they have a toolkit, and they need to apply that toolkit to problems that come along or challenges that come along.
Yeah. I really like your naming style, though. Empower Village, it sounds really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it really started because I used to have a hedge fund, which is a totally different world, but it's also very daunting because you're going out into the world to raise money and invest it. And there was something called the Alborn Village, where it was kind of cartoonified online, and you could go to like the lawyer's office, you could go to the mayor's office. And so we wanted to kind of create that, and we're still creating it so that people know they have a place to come home to. Whether it be online or physically coming in to see us. And it covers anything from, like, if you think you're going to be homeless, this is where you can get shelter. If you need food, if you need money, if you need employment, if you need psychological counseling, if you need coaching. And what we call it is my colleague at Second Harvest who feeds people, Charles, it's the assets of the community. So we're not giving anything to anybody. We're just raising their awareness on what assets are in the community that they can embrace and they can use for themselves.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. So I know you have limited time today, and we appreciate your time today. I have a feeling that there might be more
coming
podcasts that we can have coming up. And so I was really happy that you were able to do this. I've been wanting to do this with you for a long time. And so I look forward to the new year and talking with you more, and possibly having you on here in Japanese.
Okay. That's the next step.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Have a good day.
Okay. Thanks. You too.
Thanks very much.